A date with destiny is about to begin. We came to make history today, and we're delighted that you have chosen to join us. Kindly take your seats. And those who marched and knocked on doors and attended hearings and wrote position papers and raised money and knocked on some more doors and marched again for years are delighted to have this issue of economic justice and the new agenda front and center. It's an extraordinary, unprecedented day, and we're delighted that you have chosen to attend today. Today did not take place without some people doing some hard work. You've heard from the people at City and State NINFA, and the Honorable Nympha Segarra, former Deputy Mayor of the City of New York, is with us, and we're delighted that she's here. And as I said earlier, and it keeps changing so you can do this, there are some VIPs who won't be acknowledged, and it's the person in the seat next to you. So if you would introduce yourself to the person in the seat next to you, that would get us moving.
Very good.
If you would just,
That is a great concept. That is a really great concept.
the significance of this day is that we didn't come to talk about food stamps. We're not here to talk about bike lanes. We're not going to talk about the environment. We're going to talk about money, contracts, jobs in our community. We're very serious about it. And we're delighted at the response of all of these public officials and aspirants to our invitation today. To take us to the next level in the program has been my partner and co-chair. Her name is Sandra Wilkins. She's the CEO of Bradford Construction. She's also the President Emeritus of the Women Builders Council, but she's the hardest working lady in show business as far as we're concerned. She has been a partner, a relentless partner, whose phone evidently doesn't have an off switch, so at all hours of the day or night, she will call to make sure that things are right, and when she's not calling, she'll email. But she gets it done. She has been a tremendous force in this community, a dynamic voice for leadership and for change. She's the woman who wouldn't take no for an answer. She's my co-chair, and we're delighted to bring to the podium today Sandra Wilkins.
Good afternoon, everyone. And how do you follow Reverend DeGraff? Would you please email me, text me, whatever you have to do, tweet me. I would love to do it. Thank you, Reverend. And it's wonderful to be here today, and that we're so pleased that you've joined us for this program. We certainly had 3 panels of very knowledgeable speakers. I think we can all agree to that. They've shared their thoughts and recommendations on how to expand the new agenda for MWBEs. For those of us in the MWBE community, this is a momentous day. Today we define where we go next. Our progress as MWBEs has been the result of hard work, risk-taking, and talent. No doubt the community has all of that. And we're also very fortunate to also have many governmental allies as our partners. MWBEs are business people unified by a collective goal. We are working as one. We are an essential part of the New York's economy. As we all know, small business creates jobs. We are truly fueling the economic engine. Today, we are enriched by the presence of the mayoral candidates. Each being a distinguished and prominent New Yorker has brought so much to the vitality to New York City. Please give them a warm New York welcome. And we're also very privileged to have David Chen, the City Hall Bureau Chief of the New York Times, who will be our moderator for this discussion. And we also want to thank City and State for being able to have the opportunity to bring this program forward. Thank you so much. David?
Greetings, everyone. Hello, candidates. I did notice that, this stage has a fair amount of room on it, so if anyone else wants to join the field of candidates, that would be most welcome, because, there's endless speculation. In fact, Adolfo Carrion canceled. He was supposed to be at the last panel, I believe, and he canceled at the last minute, so I had heard unconfirmed rumors that he was planning to join this one instead, but I guess not. As much as I would like to go off topic on a lot of things, there are a number of questions that the organizers have asked me to try to navigate here. So the way we're going to do this is having some opening statements first. The candidates will have 3 minutes. I'm going to try to be really tough on you when it comes to being succinct. After that, there'll be some different kinds of questions, and I sort of hope that you will engage one another, go after one another if need be, and then we'll take it from there, because this is there's only 45 minutes, and it's the first of many debates and forums that for another 500 or whatever it is. I don't have that Bloomberg clock on me, but however many days there are left. So first of all, we did this alphabetically, from what I understand, even though I think it was supposed to be done by height or by free throw shooting percentage. But so Tom Allen is going to go first, and followed by the public advocate, and the controller, speaker, and the borough president, and then Mr. Thompson down there. So Tom, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much. What we're here today to talk about is economic justice, which is really the civil rights issue of this generation. Obviously, I don't think anybody on this panel is going to dispute that we need to do better with MWBEs. That's, if somebody does, please speak up now, because I'll turn over the podium to you. In addition to making sure that this city gives more contracts to MWBEs that are qualified, we need to also focus on educating this generation of teenagers and community college and college students on how to start small businesses. We need to educate them on corporate governance, because this is not just about getting contracts in the city. It's about taking back and becoming a huge part of the corporate governance in America, so that the pie is shared more equally. So, right now in America, we have, I think, less than 15% of women on corporate boards, on corporate governance boards, which is a shame. Our European counterparts have enacted legislation to make it mandatory to have 30 or 40% in some countries. This country, unfortunately, seems to be going away from things like quotas. So we talk about aspirational goals. Let's have an aspirational goal to have 50% of women and minorities at least on corporate governances, so that we can move forward. And the same is true, obviously, of the contracts. The Bloomberg administration has started the process, but the bar was actually set very low before the mayor came to office. In the past few years, there have been, I think it's gone from about 700 businesses that are getting government contracts to 3,400, which is great, but still a drop in the bucket. So we have to educate, like I said, in our schools, and we have to make it part of, it should be mandatory parts of the curriculum to teach students about finance, to teach students about financial literacy. And we have to work with the community colleges, City College, and even Columbia and NYU and some of the private colleges to make sure that they include programs not just for students who are in college, but also for adult education courses on corporate governance, so that we can have more minorities and women on the boards of all of our corporations and starting small business in the city. So I hope that what we take away from today is the importance of advocating to government that it has to work closely with education and closely with this, with the people of the city, to make sure that we do corporate sharing and make this a much fairer place. So thank you very much for coming today.
Well, thank you, David. Thank you, Sandra, Jacques, City and State, all my colleagues. Jacques said something very straightforward. a serious discussion. This is what we need to have today, and I think it's plain that the current administration in City Hall is not serious about this issue. 10 years is a long time. We haven't seen results when it comes to advancement for MWBE firms. We haven't seen a focus on it up and down the administration. We certainly don't see an administration in its composition that looks like New York City. I'm reminded of when Bill Clinton came into office, he set a standard and he lived up to it. He said he wanted an administration that looked like America. Well, if you go to City Hall, you do not see an administration that looks like New York City, and I think we feel the results of that. So it begins with choosing people who are committed to real economic justice at the highest levels and up and down the administration, and constantly enforcing those notions in everything we do. I think an economic focus is the core imperative for the city government right now. How are we creating jobs and how are we creating economic equity? There's almost no part of city government that doesn't come back to that. Now, when I look at procurement in this city, I think the track record is extraordinarily weak when it comes to MWBE firms. I think part of what amplifies that is we are also sending too much of our work, of our procurement opportunities, or our contracts out of city, out of state. So by definition, we're hurting New York City small businesses, and that means by definition MWBE small businesses. We're literally not investing in our own people. When it comes to the accessibility of MWBE opportunities, we're not promoting them. We did a study, my office, with the Federal Reserve of New York and Axiom, immigrant small business owners. 96% did not know and were not given information about how to qualify for MWBE status. So we're leaving people behind because we're not informing them, we're not bringing in, we're not even pretending to go through the motions when it comes to this current city administration. Finally, look at our pension funds. There's a huge opportunity for emerging managers, for MWBE firms in the finance industry. They have not been given sufficient opportunity over the years. We have a chance to start doing that now, but we have to be serious about it, because not only is this a matter of economic justice, these emerging managers get better returns on the investments they manage than a lot of the big mainstream companies. So there are specific changes we need to make, and we need a lineup of personnel in City Hall who will forcefully stay focused on making these changes every day of the next administration. Yeah, you can clap.
Good, Mr.
Just jump
Controller.
right in.
Yep.
Well, good afternoon, everybody.
Good vocal.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm delighted to see such an incredible turnout of leaders and entrepreneurs from all over the city. And I want to really thank City and State for convening all of us today. Because while it is called the new agenda, this really should have been an agenda from a long time ago. And I guess now is as good a time as any to restart this discussion. The city of New York has not always seen the disparities that we have seen today. Under the administration of former Mayor Dinkins, we saw much greater participation levels by minority and women contractors and entrepreneurs in city contracts. In the intervening years, the 2 decades that have transpired, we now see very low, I would say shockingly low participation rates of MWBEs in New York City contracts. And that shouldn't be the case. This is an issue where Bill de Blasio and Chris Quinn and I and our colleagues in the City Council in 2005 addressed through the passage of Local Law 129 that showed the historical disparities that minority and women firms were suffering from in the unequal contracting of city businesses. We attempted to rectify the situation by putting specific numbers in that legislation. And in the past several years after the enactment of that law, we have fought to get results from the city, from this administration, in terms of specifically where we are on city contracting with MWBEs. I did that as a member of the City Council for 4 years after the passage of Local Law 129. When I took office as City Controller, we implored the administration to give us the hard statistics to back up their annual claims of ever-increasing participation by MWBEs in city contracts. That was not to be found. And so what we wound up doing was having to set up our own MWBE report card for every city agency, where we now show exactly how many dollars are actually going into MWBEs by agency. When we first launched this in December of 2010, we found that it was a 2.4% participation rate. Totally unacceptable. Not reflective of the skills and talents that minority and women's have, but reflective of what I believe is a systemic bias in the way the city puts out its contracts that make it very difficult for minorities and women to get the city contracts on a level playing field. We want equal competition. In the long run, it's not only good for the MWBEs, but it is good for the taxpayers of New York. I look forward to your questions and the ability and the opportunity to expand on some of these concepts. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Thank you, City and State, and Sandra. And, you know, as we all collectively try to help this city come out of this great recession, we need to remember that before we went into the recession, there were communities of color in this city where unemployment rates were double that of the New York City average. And what is one of the best ways we can help reduce unemployment and help New Yorkers get the great dream of being and staying in the middle class? Helping them open small businesses. And what is the best way the city can do that? Is by helping using our budget powers to create more work for those great MWBE small businesses. How do you do that? By making sure that our contracts are distributed, yes, in a fiscally responsible way, but yes, in an equitable and just way. The latter has simply not happened to the degree that we need it to. Now, John is right. In 2005, we took steps and passed a bill that was incredibly well-intentioned. But looking back, the legislative scope of that bill didn't go far enough, and clearly the implementation was not done correctly. What do we hear because of that? We hear from MWBEs in the city, I didn't know how to get the contract. I bid and I knew I should have gotten the contract, but I didn't. I got the contract and they owe me a lot of money. Londell Davis is here today. I was in his small business, a terrific place that repairs and maintains fire extinguishers. If you have any, see him after the forum, please. But he told me he bid on a contract. He knew he should have gotten it, but he didn't. He also told me one city agency owed him $80,000. Now look, we got together. He got to rebid. He got that contract. He got his $80,000. But you shouldn't have to know the Speaker of the City Council for things like that to get taken care of. Now, the answer is there. That's the good news. If we had a chief diversity officer in this city, in the mayor's office, Londell would have somebody to call. And if we had a chief diversity officer and we had something we're introducing legislation to put into place, which we're calling MWBE Stat, a law that required every city agency to report specified MWBE statistics on a regular basis, we wouldn't have to wait for Sandra Londell to call. We would have information in front of the council, in front of all of you, in front of that chief diversity officer, so we could hold commissioners and their chief contracting officers accountable. What else do we need to do? We need to recognize that the original baseline study that led us to the level of $1 million of prioritized contracts was too low. And we need to get the new study done quickly, and then we need to open up contracts. Let me put it in perspective. Right now, $433 million of contracts are prioritized in the MWBE program. If we opened it up to, say, 80%, we're talking $2.2 billion a year. What's the amount of MWBE contracts that have been let since 2005? $2 billion. That should be a yearly pot, not one that it's only been since the law has been passed. And those are steps that we can very easily take to move this program forward in a way that really puts people to work. There's other things we can do. We need to expand programs that are working in the Department of Small Business Services. To give you an example, we in the council did a training program with them. We targeted 41 MWBEs. They were able to get $24 million more in contracts. That's 100 jobs. So this is a discussion, not just about the economy in a theoretical way, but in a real way, where we can go into New York City neighborhoods, help businesses start, support small businesses, and create and keep jobs, which is the best way to make sure this city comes out of the recession better than we went into it. Thank you.
Well, thank you, City and State, and David, and everyone for giving us an opportunity to be here today. Let me start by getting to what I think is the crux of the problem. Look, Local Law 129 was a very baby step in this process. We were able to track some contracts, and there were some worthy goals. But think about what we're dealing with today. Out of $15 billion in contracts, city contracts, 3.7% go to minority and women-owned businesses. 3.7%. That is extraordinary. And when you think about what's happening now, in 2011, we actually went down from 714 million all the way down to 561 million from 2010, a reduction of 20%. We're not going forward, we're going backwards. And I'm here to say what I think is very important. The reality is, this is not about a handout to business and people. This is not about redesigning some social order. This is about sound economic policy, because when you diversify the businesses that are able to access contracts, you increase the capacity of the New York City economy. That has to be our #1 goal, and that is something that we have to realize going forward on this issue. Now, as a trustee of the NYSERS Pension Fund, as John mentioned, I helped pass a resolution in our $40 billion pension fund that in the economic impact statement of the fund, we made sure for the first time to codify the role of emerging and minority managers. We did that and put it on the same level as private equity or hedge funds, because we recognize at the fund that John Liu and Bill Thompson were right. The more you diversify people in our economy and our pension funds, the rate of return is better. Why can't we have that same energy and commitment when it comes to city contracts? We're not there, but we can get there. And Chris is absolutely right. We must have a chief diversity officer. But Bill's also right. A chief diversity officer in an administration that's not diverse will not work. And I'm here to tell you, that during my transition, we're going to talk diversity before we take office in January 1st, 2014, so that when we have a diversity officer, it's not going to be a shock to the system. The person isn't going to look different and strange to people. And that diversity officer is going to have real responsibility and real staff. And you know what staff's going to do? Hold commissioners accountable. Diversity officer is going to help break down the government agency silos, those hardened silos of this administration. You know, agencies never talk to each other, right? So small business never talks to the Department of Education. We're going to break all that down. The diversity officer and staff is going to bring people together and create a pipeline, starting for people in high school, to get the vocational and business experience they need to begin to create their own businesses that will not just be able to be certified MWBE and become certified, but actually get a contract that will increase their businesses. Because at the end of the day, you can certify thousands, but if you're only at that 3.7%, you're just not going to make it. So we have a lot to do, and why this forum is important is because we've got to lay it out there. We need to figure out what Philadelphia is doing in terms of small business loans and adopt a loan program for small businesses right here in the city. We have to look at capacity issues and finally talk about the elephant in the room, which is how do small businesses build out that capacity to actually get an award? It's easy to apply, even with all the paperwork. It's hard to get the success. And lastly, and I think this speaks to the fundamental problem that we face on this issue, we have got to expand what MWB is. We need more women in this process. We need to talk to Asian Americans and get them in the process. We need to look at the disparity study that the mayor's cooking in the oven I haven't been briefed yet, but that's not unusual, right? But we also have to then look at what Andrew Cuomo's doing on the state level. Let's look at what Billy Thompson and the Cuomo administration did, because they're already years ahead of what the city can do. And by the way, my chief diversity officer, if you want it, it's yours. Okay? It's yours. Actually, anything you want is yours. But my good friend Billy Thompson gets a lot of credit for his work on this issue. Thank you.
Scott,
Go ahead, Bill.
I am not going to offer you the position of Chief Diversity Officer in the City of New York.
Good, come down.
Look, another position perhaps, but not that one. To City and State, David, thanks for getting us together. This is a great moment. And let me just say that I look around the room and you know, Jacques, Sandra as co-chairs, so many people in this room have been involved not for a year, not for 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years in the issue of diversity and fairness. And all too often, there have been not even baby steps, tiny steps forward, and major steps backwards. When you just, at times when you thought things would happen and things would occur, you're let down. Laws passed and you believe that we're moving forward. And the reality is, unfortunately, all too often, it's been a mirage. It's been an illusion, and you've been lied to. So it is great to have this conversation this afternoon, this MWBE conversation. This is what we're talking about in the city of New York is a seismic shift. Real business, real growth across communities, across the city of New York. You know, Scott and others have alluded to some of the work that I've done. You know, as I said, I can look around the room and so many people, we've worked together to try and create fairness. When I was deputy borough president, I remember bringing in, when MetroTech was built, we said it couldn't be done the same way. There had to be fairness. There had to be MWBE goals. And back then, in the late 1980s, we were able to achieve 18% back then. As president of the New York City Board of Education, I remember going, and many of you know Michael Garner, who was over at the School Construction Authority. I remember meeting with the head of the SCA as the new president of the Board of Education and saying, by the way, he's in charge of diversity, more or less, and creating opportunity. Where's his office? And many of you in this room who know Michael, remember, he didn't have an office. It wasn't taken seriously at all. Moving forward, as comptroller, and I'm real proud of the work that I did there, talked about when I ran access and opportunity for firms, for minority firms, MWBE firms, and then we went in and did it and moved the number from 1 billion under management when I got there to 7 billion when I left. The best emerging manager and developing manager program in the nation, in the country. And we made sure on a staffing level that there was inclusion and diversity at every level. You know, we talk about the state of New York, and the state of New York right now is light years ahead of the city of New York. The one lesson that you learn, if you look at the state and compare it to the city, it's not just the legislation. And legislation is much better on the state level, and Chris is right and others in talking about the need to change that legislation. But the thing that you learn on the state level, it starts at the top. It starts at the top. It starts not with the chief diversity officer, and the state of New York has one. It starts with the governor. And the governor saying to his commissioners, this is a priority for me. On the state level, and no, I chair the task force for the governor that's going to try and get us there. The number there is 20%. Not 3 and 4 and 5, 20%. And the question is, for the commissioners, they're given assistance and support to try and get there, but they have to get there. And in the end, you said to the governor, it's going to be apparent when you fire someone because they didn't get there that this is a priority for you. That's when it becomes a priority. And right now, I'll tell you, there's not a commissioner who wants to get fired on the state level. They're all working hard because they realize it is a priority. New York City, by comparison, has been an embarrassment. We may have legislation on the books, but again, it starts at the top. And the most important thing is the next person who will be the mayor of the city of New York and making it a priority. Chief Diversity Officer, absolutely important. But in the end, that person reports to the mayor. And all the commissioners report to the mayor. So who the next mayor of the city of New York is and what the priorities are incredibly important. This is an opportunity for us to be able to move this city forward, to be able to grow small businesses and minority businesses across the city of New York, to be able to employ people on community and be able to build institutions that will be there when the next mayor of the city of New York moves on. So that's why this forum is incredibly important. I know that David's looking at me going, okay, come on, bring it to an end. You've finished your 3
Not the
minutes.
Belmont Stakes, but you're getting there.
However, one last thing, and just to dispel, and the one thing we've learned over the years, minority businesses, you don't sacrifice quality in bringing them on board and giving them opportunity. If anything, in so many ways, they'll do a better job. Everyone will say the firms aren't there. Yes, they are. Those firms are there. We can work with them in some where they don't have the capacity. We can work with them to build that capacity, and doing it through creating and working on pools of capital. But the number of the firms are there. And then in the end, the last thing that we have learned, and as New York City, the disparity study hasn't come out. In 2009, I remember talking to the people who had it and done it in draft. They said then that New York City was one of the worst cities in the country, was one of the worst cities in the country. And in the end, it starts at the top. So let me stop there and move on to our questions. But again, this is a great moment for so many who have worked so hard and believed for so long. We have a long way to go, but we can get there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone. So we have a few questions. You guys have actually alluded to a few points here, but the first question I'd like to pose is, a few of you mentioned Mayor Bloomberg's record on MWBE issues. So I'd like to just ask for sort of a letter grade, if you will, of the mayor's record and some of the things that. Please tell our distinguished guests here what areas were considered a success, what were a failure, what needs improvement, all the kinds of things you see on report cards. So please, Tom. You can give a number also.
I thank you. When I was a teacher about 25 years ago at Stuyvesant High School, kids were clamoring for my class because I was an easy grader. So I'm going to see if I can. I think the mayor gets a B- for effort, and I think he gets a C- for results. I think the mayor tried to make this a small priority, and I think the fact that we're all here today means that it's been put on people's radars, and the mayor this morning spoke, for those of you that were here, and he sounded earnest, but I think it hasn't been enough of a priority. The one thing I will say is that even though things start from the top, I challenge the 5 people sitting to my left, who collectively have a lot of power, to hold the mayor's feet to the fire over the next year and a half. We shouldn't wait for 2 years for this initiative to start. All of you could hire chief diversity officers if you're office holders and try to make that a priority in your office. And that's what I would do if I was a public advocate or controller or borough president or speaker. Or the former controller. That's my letter grade.
Bill, thank you.
First of all, I appreciate that earlier people were offering each other jobs, so I want to offer Scott Stringer an opportunity to be communications consultant, because I thought his line, "A chief diversity officer doesn't work in administration that's not diverse," was better than anything I ever came up with. So Scott, I want to thank you for that.
Chief diversity.
Scott,
you're going to be the new Howard.
That's right.
We are going to set up some real new opportunities.
You would be a better dressed Howard Wolfson, I guarantee that. You can quote me on that.
That's not
quote
saying
me.
much.
Again, a low bar.
To Tom's point, I'm very proud of the diversity of our office, and I think you do have to live it in everything you do, and that's what I've tried to do. To the mayor, first of all, Bill Thompson raised a very powerful point in sort of puncturing that stereotype, but I'm telling you that that stereotype, oh, there aren't qualified firms, oh, there aren't qualified employees, that lives, it is alive and well and tragically current in New York City government right now. So that's point one, that the notion you're still having that conversation in 2012. I had one of those conversations about 2 months ago with a city official, and it shocked me to hear, wow, we would love to do that if only we could find the qualified firm. I remember when I was in City Hall hearing that kind of discussion 20 years ago and thinking it was outdated then. So we all have a responsibility for calling that out every time we confront it. It is ridiculous. It's a absolutely inappropriate notion. I've never had trouble in any hiring dynamic finding a qualified person of any and all backgrounds. And I know for all of the things that the city needs to contract with, there are many, many opportunities, many firms available. Another point in getting to the point on the mayor. The mayor, and I think this is a shocking thing considering it comes out of the private sector, is the lack of sort of economic focus in so much of the policymaking of this administration. The lack of focus on real job creation, real economic impact on people's lives, especially the farther away you go from Manhattan, the farther you go into communities of color, et cetera. Well, in the real world, let's look at something the mayor announced, which was good on paper and I think heartfelt, which was the Young Men's Initiative, focused on helping young men of color. A good and noble thing. You know what would really help young men of color? Would be a rigorous MWBE program so that firms had opportunities to really grow their businesses in the city and turn around and hire those young men. That's what would really turn this city around. Everything else is theory. If you want empowerment and you want social change and you want economic justice, it starts by giving the ball to people who will then turn around and hire people and give them an opportunity that the quote-unquote mainstream will not give them. And that's how it really works. So in terms of the mayor's grade, and by the way, the general notion, we're all asked to give grades to things. We will be for the next year and a half. It's a questionable process, giving a grade for something complex, but this one I feel comfortable doing. It's an F for this administration. It's plain and simple. And I'll tell you why, and I don't do that lightly, because I can tell you things that I think the mayor has done well. But on this one, it starts with choosing the wrong lineup. And once you've chosen the wrong lineup for your administration, it doesn't surprise me that the follow-up on our laws and our aspirations, on our goals, is so entirely weak. And so it was doomed from the start. The mayor was not personally committed to it. The people around him were not personally committed to it. We haven't seen results. We haven't seen that earnest effort to try and fix the problem. That sounds like an F to me. And so in this case, I'd say it's not even close, and we have to, unfortunately, start over. Thank you.
John? Thank you. I would say in the first several years of this particular administration, if you go by the press releases and the mayor's management report, they would get an A. But then we finally get a look at the numbers, the reports that we had been clamoring for the administration to release. Bill Thompson mentioning that in 2009 there was a draft report that I also tried to get when I took office as comptroller, and they never were willing to give it up. And it was because it would have showed very clearly that the administration gets an F for failure on their efforts to include MWBEs in a fair way into the city's contracting process. So the quick answer is F. Now, I think if you look at and David, you wrote an article about this, the sheer lack of diversity at City Hall. The folks at City Hall would not even deny it. They readily admit it. The problem is that they don't simply admit it and say they need to do a better job. They admit it, and then they add in the line, but that's because we only look for merit. That was so offensive, that kind of response, as if you can't find merit in the diverse neighborhoods, in the 8.4 million people of New York City. It's just shockingly unacceptable. The response is worse than the actual result, as if the result was not bad enough. There's plenty of talent. And, you know, there's lots of talk about this. Let me give you one anecdote that I experienced when I first took office as comptroller. I was told that the way we sell our city bonds, we have these big investment banks that essentially take turns selling our city's bonds. Believe it or not, they're actually called a syndicate. I can't believe that they still use that kind of terminology today. So we go to the syndicate, and we go to the next firm in line and give them a chance to sell bonds. Well, shortly after I took office, we had a chance to refinance $1 billion worth of New York City bonds, to try to save taxpayers' money. But rather than going to the syndicate as usual, I asked my office to work with OMB and figure out how to get other firms involved. We opened up the process, had what is called a bake-off. Essentially, had firms
I think there's a
propose,
limit on how many metaphors you can use.
had firms openly propose how they would sell, how they would refinance $1 billion of New York City bonds. And the same 4 companies in the syndicate they proposed, their evaluations were not near the top. Several other firms proposed. And in fact, a new company who very few people had ever heard of before won the top evaluation and got the chance to lead our bond sale, $1 billion worth of city bonds. In the process, because their proposal was superior, they saved taxpayers more money than would have otherwise been achieved if we just went to the syndicate and had the next company take their turn. It was a savings to the taxpayer because they were qualified. They knew how to do the work. And it turned out to be a little-known company that happened to be an African-American firm. And so it shows that the talent is there. What we have to do is, it's not about giving handouts. It is about leveling the playing field and giving everybody an equal shot at competing for the contracts that the city gives. And what happened in that case? The taxpayers got a better deal. We're able to diversify and broaden our suppliers, whether it be for goods or services. And a new company got involved. And they have now, I recently found out, that company, a company called Loop Capital, has expanded and has hired more employees in their New York offices. And so now they're hiring, and it goes to show that the contracting for MWBEs is inextricably linked towards eliminating the longstanding unemployment disparities that we see here in the city of New York. So that's what we need to do. We need agencies and commissioners, deputy mayors, and the mayor, him or herself, to go out there, go the extra mile. Take some risks, because you can't do the same old all the time and think that you're going to make changes. It has to be going the extra mile. It has to be taking risks. And I'm sorry to say, but I have to disagree with some of my colleagues here. A chief diversity officer, whenever there's a problem, there's like this gut knee-jerk reaction to appoint somebody. I remember a few years ago, we had a huge problem. Bill de Blasio will certainly agree with this. We had a huge problem with the lack of parent involvement in how our schools were being run. And so they went ahead and appointed, believe it or not, a chief parent engagement officer. Years later, parents are still not being engaged. We don't need a chief diversity officer to make diversity a priority. We need a chief executive officer to make diversity a priority.
Yes.
The point that has been made, I just want to completely agree with, that there is more than enough talent out there amongst the MWBE community in New York to increase substantially our percentage of contractors who are MWBEs. And trust me, our contract budget's growing, so it's not the size of the contract budgets that's the problem, but it is also, we've structured the program in a way that works against legitimate MWBEs. We don't have a real program to confirm that because on paper you have presented yourself as an MWBE, you are an MWBE. And that puts everyone in this room at a disadvantage. We need that put into place. 2, we need to recognize that the contract is important, but the subcontract is important. The subcontract is important. And we need to let MWBEs speak for themselves about how they want to bid, which part of the contract they want to bid for, whether they want to bid in partnership with another MWBE or another entity. The way it is set up now, that pushes subcontractors and subs out of the process of being counted towards the goals. We need to make those changes, and I think you do that, and we'll see even more clearly that there is more than enough quality out there. And what is also going to happen is as we get more MWBEs to get the level of city contracts that they deserve, that is going to help inspire other women and people of color in this city to open up businesses and begin contracting, because that word of mouth will spread, and I think we'll see the pool grow so large that that type of an answer, which is already unacceptable, will just clearly be even more laughable than it now is. Now, look, the results are completely, they're not satisfactory. There is no one who can give a grade here that is satisfactory. They are not satisfactory. They're not satisfactory. Why? Because they're laughably low. They're not satisfactory because they don't even begin to come up to meeting the level of talent and skill that is out there. And as former Comptroller Thompson has referenced, they're unacceptable and unsatisfactory because they don't meet the level we've done in the past in this city when there weren't even programs as structured as this. So clearly the grade is one that's just not satisfactory, not one that we can be satisfied with, and we need to, Tom is right, not wait just for the next mayor, but get things rolling immediately in every way we can so that structures are in place so that the next mayor can seize on them and run with them on the first day that they are in office. Thank you.
But, Madam Speaker, if I may, I mean, is there some sort of, I mean, unsatisfactory is kind of a big field, so if there's, if you could sort of be a little more precise in assigning a value to that, you know, as opposed to.
That is true. It's funny, I went to Catholic school, so the grades were either E, excellent, S, satisfactory, U, unsatisfactory. I might have been a little too familiar with the U, I just have to say, from my past grading, personal experiences. I would say C, C minus.
Don't offer a job.
So I would say, if you think about the history of this issue, going back to the Giuliani administration, really sort of collapsing a lot of the progress of the Dinkins administration, and then the Bloomberg administration with the city council revving it back up again, I would say, in all fairness to the mayor, that it's an incomplete. And that's why this forum today is so compelling, because when you have a canvas that's not fully painted, the opportunity for the next administration is so extraordinary. And I think that part of what our focus has to be is not so much on what the past is about, but how we go forward. And I happen to think, and I respectfully disagree with John, you need a diversity officer, and you need a staff, because this is not akin just to one agency. Yes, we need more women in construction, and we need that to be a bottom line and a real goal. But let me tell you something, we need to deal with the School Construction Authority. They're no better. We need to deal with every agency in city government that has the real power of letting these government contracts with virtually no oversight. And imagine a chief adversity officer who could, in fact, level that playing field on so many of these issues. I think this is something that is used in corporate America. Major corporations realize that they do better business-wise when they create diversity within their own company model. They spend millions, hundreds of millions of dollars creating diversity, not because these fancy chieftains are particularly concerned about it, but they realize that in competing in the global marketplace, it's good for business. And New York City right now, we've got the good for business. We speak 170 different languages. People come from 200 countries. The global economy is changing. The demographics of the United States, we are a majority-minority country. We are already a we're soon to be a majority-minority country. We are a majority-minority city. Let's bottle this. Let's get ahead of this and create a new way to create jobs and foster economic development. This is what a chief diversity officer can do with a chief who gets it. And lastly, people will focus on, you know, if we're going to have a land use model, let's make sure that we have MWB in construction. Council and our office, we've collaborated to make sure Columbia University and other places, Chris and I have been able to make sure we guarantee those jobs and those opportunities, or those goals, I should say. But we can't just think in individual silos. Every agency of government has their own contracting. And that's why I think it's very important in the post-Bloomberg era, we look at this comprehensively, we look at this holistically, we add funding where appropriate, but funding's not the only answer. There has to be a pipeline created that creates a 10-year model. Because otherwise, folks, we're going to be back here in 8 years unless they extend term limits. If they come back here, just, I'm trying to cover all my bases. But we'll be back here, let's say 8 years. We'll be back here 8 years. We'll be at we'll go from 3.7 to 6.2. It's time to take a sledgehammer and do the real work that's going to have long-term benefit. Thank you.
So hold on, so Scott, incomplete is fine and good, but doesn't really do a lot for me or my, the many reporters who are here. So I'd like to sort of pin you down a little in terms of, 10 and a half years out of 12 is a lot of time to be able to assess, a performance. It's beyond midterms, it's sort of finals, basically, so what say you?
David Chen, this is not the lightning round of the New York One debate. I'm going to stick with...
We can make it that if you'd like.
I will see you in August of 2013 with my yes and my no's. But I'm not copping out. I really think that a letter grade does not fully... The bottom line here is it's incomplete because we've never had a comprehensive policy. So I could give the mayor many, many A's on a program here and a program here. I can give him B's on other programs. Many of you could grade much better than us. At the end of the day, the totality of the effort was never fully realized. And that's really why I feel it's an incomplete.
Well, okay.
That screws up.
You can come back to that later if you'd like, because the form is not yet complete, so you can.
Well,
Okay. All right. So,
Turn of the phrase.
Mr. Thompson.
I hate to disappoint you. I'm going to stay away from the letter grade, and I'm going to go to, and I think I was very clear in my comments, that, and I'll let you pick the grade almost, that the efforts on the behalf of the Bloomberg administration and the mayor have been failing. Those are failing. You picked the grade, but they failed at real MWBE participation. The grade becomes less relevant than the reality of what they have or haven't done. I think that we're talking about the last year and a half of an administration that's been there for 10 and a half years. What was the old phrase? The definition of insanity is doing something time and time again and expecting a different outcome. I'm not going to put my hopes on the last 18 months and expect that the outcomes will be different. The rhetoric may be different or may be better, but the outcomes aren't going to be. So what I'm going to do is to look to the promise of the future and what really should be in the city of New York. I mean, a chief diversity officer, I think it is important. If you look at the work that's being done on the state level by Urtia Dinsey-Flores as the chief diversity officer for the state, she's doing a good job. If you look at the work that's being done by the deputy secretary, Alfonso, I can't believe I just... Alfonso David. And Alfonso has done a great job in moving diversity forward on the state level. If you look and you talk about what a chief diversity officer can be, I mentioned a name earlier who was at the School Construction Authority, who built programs over there that have been replicated and copied across the country. Looking now at Michael Garner, who's over at the MTA, and the work that he's doing there. One person, even with strong leadership at the top, one person as CDO can make a huge difference and can really create the additional focus and bring the ideas to the table. Wow, as if on cue, Michael Garner walked through the door. Whoa, somebody said to get, hello, Michael, how are you?
Impressive.
But I think that it's a question of what needs to be done in New York City. And as we look not to the next year and a half, but past that, it is looking at things like, I talked about a commitment and setting goals. It is breaking contracts up across city agencies into smaller contracts on a subcontract and contract basis, not just sub, but on a contract basis. It's working to identify pools of capital and making adjustments like the state has done in bonding areas so that people can get work and get the opportunities that they need. It is eliminating barriers that block MWBE firms from doing business. It's incorporating MWBE language into all contracts that the city of New York lets so everybody understands up front what it really means. It is, more than anything, transparency. The state's developing a system where everybody, not just the governor and commissioners, everybody will be able to monitor online where things are in a real-time basis. Why can't the city of New York do that? So real transparency, real openness, so that all of you could sit here and say, wait a minute, you talked about 20%, you're only at 13, or this agency's at 10 and some others are at 25. That's what we should be able to do in the city of New York. Real transparency, real openness, moving a real MWBE program forward.
So I take that as an F, correct?
I took that as a failing grade. As I said, you can pick the failing grade, a failing grade.
Okay. Unsatisfactory failure, okay. And you are also welcome to be more specific shortly. So let me speed this up a little bit, because you guys have been a little leisurely in some of your responses. I would like to,
Or perhaps leisurely in the chairing, David.
could be, absolutely. Yeah. That's right. So let me ask you what you guys would do if you sort of ascend to the chair or the throne of the mayoralty in terms of what would you do differently in terms of MWBE program and supplier diversity policies? What would you change to local law 129? If you could reference that. And also, would you make John, I guess is not the case with you, but I mean, if you had a chief diversity officer, would that person be, say, a deputy mayor level or what have you? So, looking forward now, imagining yourself in the mayor's office, what would you do? Please? Yes.
I'll be very quick for everybody's benefit. I think this mayor has been very careful to set metrics. I think we'd have to set specific goals so that by the end of my first term, I would make sure that I think it was 2.7%, that goes up to at least 20%, which is what the state has done. So we have to have specific goals in the first term. The chief diversity officer should be a deputy mayor level person, and there should also be specific percentages that we set so that we know what is acceptable and what is achievable. I think it's been too loose. The mayor feels that he's doing well, and maybe he thinks he's getting an A right now, but clearly, I'm the easiest grader here at a C minus. He's not. So we have to set out goals, just like the mayor has in things like crime. We have to do it in the same way in the economic community, and we have to then meet those goals.
Well, I think I agree with some of what Tom said. I think the way John framed it, I want to really emphasize this. I think it gets to the heart of the matter. This begins with the mayor. So you could have a chief diversity officer ignored by the mayor. That'll get us nowhere. We need the mayor committed to this policy. And by the way, to David's question, who will sit on the throne, I'd like to say we also don't need another imperial mayoralty. This is democracy, so we'd like a leader working with people across all communities. But John's formulation is powerful because the mayor has to be personally involved regularly in achieving a goal. I think 20% is the right standard. That being said, my impulse here would be to say a chief diversity officer who is also one of the deputy mayors. I've seen the inner workings of City Hall. I spent 4 years of my life in the Dinkins administration. Deputy mayors have the ability to move policy across agencies and be heard and be followed. So I think the chief diversity officer needs to have that kind of dual rank in the administration to be effective. I want to name just a couple of the quick changes I think are very crucial, but I do want to say, and with absolute respect for Scott Stringer, I just have a disagreement with him on the SCA. I don't think the School Construction Authority, I don't think it's perfect. I think Lorraine Grillo, who's here with us, has done some very good work to move it forward. And I think we have to acknowledge, even though I have strong views on the administration writ large, I do think some of the individual agencies are making progress. I want to give her credit for that. But to the big picture, the local law, I think there's a broad agreement here, has not at all worked out as intended. There may be additional actions to take in terms of amending the law, but I think the crux of this is administrative. The crux of this is taking what we already have on the books and actually applying it, and actually showing agency heads that there are consequences if they don't achieve progress. And this is, look, it gets back to the question of not only the diversity in an administration from top to bottom, but a sense of consequence. With all due respect to the mayor, there's been a certain amount of governance by press release, and then there is not a follow-up accountability process. If it comes down to real progress with MWBEs, an agency commissioner either has done it or hasn't done it. And I think a commissioner that too often does not achieve their goals should not continue being a commissioner. And that's the ultimate accountability. If every commissioner knows this is a true priority of the administration, you'll start to see action on the ground. Finally, all of the tools at our disposal, again, contracting process, procurement, too much of the business going out of city to begin with, that's hurting MWBEs, we have to change that. Emerging managers having more opportunity through the pension funds, the outreach effort. I have to tell you, I was astounded when we did our study on immigrant small business, because here are people that would immediately start to benefit, but there's been no outreach. The city's attitude towards immigrant small business is, good luck with that. It's not engagement. It's not how do we help you succeed, how do we get you to the opportunities that exist in the public sector. It's benign neglect. And in a city, the ultimate city of immigrants, and a city that will live or die on the strength of our immigrant small business sector, that's bad policy. So I think it's a series of things, and the answer to David's question, it's a series of things we can do largely within our current law, but with an absolute laser-like focus on achieving these goals.
John?
Thank you. There are a lot of things that can and should be done. The law is in place, and while the law is not as strong as many of us would like to see, we're not even close to meeting the aspirations of the weak law as it is already on the books. So we can say pass more robust measures, but the weak law that's already in place isn't even being complied with. So what do? We change some of the procurement rules, which is something that my office has been working on. Change some of the bonding requirements, for example, that's keeping a lot of the smaller entrepreneurs, many of the women and minority entrepreneurs, from bidding on contracts. The retainage practices where city agencies hold on to money long after a project has been completed, that's also hurting the economics of many of the entrepreneurs who are in question here. So there are changes to the procurement rules that need to be enacted. There are also metrics, as Tom alluded to, metrics that have to be put in place. And in the city of New York, we do have a system of metrics in place. That is the MWBE report card that I established in 2010, at the end of 2010. It is available online, and it is updated real time. As soon as a payment gets made to an MWBE, the website is updated, and it increases, or in some cases decreases, the percentages that is assigned to every single city agency. By the way, at the state level, however commendable the 20% goal is, there is still, as Bill mentioned, no way to measure that at the state level. We do need something at the state level to begin to measure that real time. But in the city, we already have that in place. And since the MWBE report card had been implemented, city agencies, for better or for worse, they have been inching up their percentages. Not as quickly as I'd like to see, but nonetheless, there is now a real measure by which commissioners, by which the mayor, by which any of our elected officials or the public at large can see exactly how much business city agencies, each one of them, are actually doing with minority and women-owned businesses. So the metrics are there. But even more than legislation and changes in the procurement rules and the metrics that are used to measure the actual spending with minority and women contractors, there requires a cultural shift, a change in attitude. And that can only come from the top. Now, the chief diversity officer is great if diversity is the goal. I would submit to you that diversity is not the goal. The goal is equal opportunity. When you have equal opportunity, the diversity will present itself naturally. The problem, the reason we don't have diversity among the entrepreneurs and the contractors who do work for the city is because the opportunity is not equal. So the goal is equal opportunity. I think pretty much every city agency, including the mayor's office, has some people who are responsible for equal opportunity. There are equal opportunity officers in every agency already. But what are they doing? Are they ensuring that the opportunity is equal? I'm not sure that that's taking place. So we need a cultural shift, a change in attitude. And that change, that directive, has to come from the top. It can't come from an appointed officer, no matter how high an appointee that person is. It's got to come from the chief executive officer. In the case of New York City, the mayor.
Thank you very much. You know, we've all, in different grades or however we've described it, have clearly said, we're not doing good enough. But the great thing is, whoever the next mayor is, we have tremendous potential to get an A+. Look around this room. We have a huge pool of MWBEs who are so interested in doing business in the city of New York, they're fighting for the opportunity. That starts us incredibly high bar, and the sky's the limit, really, from there. All we need to do in government is set things up in a way so all of the MWBEs out there can excel. How do you do that? You do that by making it a priority as mayor, by saying this is a goal of your administration and I'm going to be held accountable. How am I going to be held accountable? By appointing somebody at the deputy mayor level, but not somebody who has the other responsibilities of a deputy mayor, who has these sole responsibilities. And you agree to goals that your administration's going to report on transparently to the public and allow yourself to be graded on a regular basis on that. How else do you do it? You take concrete steps like the ones we've talked about, like opening up contracts far above the $1 million range to the vast majority of the contracts out there and let everybody bid on them. You say we recognize contractors, subcontractors, sub-subs, partnerships, and however else the MWBE community articulates that you want to put contracts together. Also, we stop making MWBEs get certified with the city, with the state, with the port, with the MTA, with this one and their brother. You get on one list, we'll recognize all lists. And why can I say that with confidence? Because you also add in to the responsibility of the Chief Diversity Officer a real verification process. So somebody can't just be the name on the check and happen to be a woman or a person of color, but that you really have to prove, and we find that fraud that is out there. You put that in place, you make it a priority, we're very quickly, not in 8 years, going to be back here where we see ourselves really excelling much higher than we ever could have imagined. Because the truth is, I don't think there are a lot of problems out there that New Yorkers can't come together and solve. And when you look at something like this, when you look at somebody like Lonnie Davis, who served his country, learned a skill, came back into his neighborhood of Harlem and said, I'm going to open a business, and I'm going to hire other veterans and other people from this neighborhood. And all I want is when I bid to have my contract judged the right way and the program I'm in scored correctly. And all I want when I do work is to get paid on time. And then that happens, Londell's going to just grow and grow and grow. And you know what else we can do that'll make sure we hit that A+ quickly? The next mayor can go to Albany and support legislation we in the council have had pending in Albany. Legislation that would take the contract laws, which now say lowest responsible bidder, right? We want it to say lowest responsible bidder, but 10% higher if you're a New York City company, or 10% higher if you're an MWBE, because sometimes MWBEs start out smaller, and we need to recognize when you're smaller, costs can be higher. But you know what? It's worth the money because it'll circulate right back amongst the taxpayers and support the taxpayers. So the plan is there. This isn't a problem we can't solve. That's the exciting thing. It's about focus, commitment, and moving quickly. Thank you.
So, talked a lot about a chief diversity officer and leadership at the top, but I just want to round out some other thoughts about how we can make this process better. I really think that a lot of what our goals have to be is about building capacity for MWBEs from the beginning through maturity. There really has to be a plan for high school through community college to higher ed to bolster vocational apprenticeship programs. We do need to think about some of the big guns in various fields mentoring so that there is that ladder that can work its way up. That has been the tradition of the city. Working people, people who came to this country who started at the ladder at the bottom and then slowly climbed up. We need to create that kind of pipeline for MWBE because that's the only way the the small company is going to grow into the big company. And as I started out in the beginning, I really believe this is not about a handout. This is not about checking off the box. This is about a very shrewd economic strategy for the city. We can promote joint ventures. We can promote contracting opportunities in a variety of industries. We don't have to be limited to just a few. And with all great respect for my colleague Bill de Blasio, who I work with very closely, you don't disagree with me on SEA. You like Jean Grillo. What you agree with me on is we should not be limited to one or two agencies, but SEA and every other agency should be scrutinized, not just to be punitive, but to bring them in and say, how can we work with the Department of Education and work better to identify the young people of tomorrow that will be creating these wonderful businesses someday, and how can we get them there? So many people come to our country, so many people like me who grew up in this city, who believe that if they played by the rules, if they did the right thing, if they worked really, really hard, they would get to a position that they could be somebody and help raise their families. And we have deferred that dream in so many of our communities in this city. And we've got to get back to that sense that everybody who is working hard, making sure that they're developing their business, has access to capital, has access to trainers, has access to grant writers, has access to mentors, so that this can really be part of our economy. Not to go backwards as we have in 2011, but actually to go forward. And that's what I hope we will be able to do. And that's why this forum is so important, because whoever's elected mayor, I think there is a sense that we have to get to a better place. We have to make sure that this economic fabric of this city incorporates the rich diversity that we live in today. That is good for business in this city, and that's why we're here today. Thank you.
I guess there is a benefit in going last, because I have a feeling that David's looking like, wrap it up. Look,
You're a good mind reader.
I can tell. Look. You know, this is Chief Diversity Officer on a deputy mayor level, yes. Diversity of staff, absolutely. I mean, I was always proud of the diversity of my staff. You know, one of the startling numbers I remember from 2009 was the current administration, at least compared to the previous, compared to the Giuliani administration, was less diverse on higher levels than the Giuliani administration. And I never thought that that would be possible, in all due respect, but it was true. Less diverse than the former administration. That can't continue. That is part of what New York City should be, an administration that is diverse. The next mayor of the city of New York needs to have the passion and the commitment and the drive to making it that. Commitment to diversity on a staff level, commitment to diversity in the business that we do. You know, the message that we send right now to young people across the city of New York, to those who come here from around the world, is we want you to participate only to some extent, only to a degree, because we're not going to give you a chance to do more than that. The thing that makes this the greatest city in the world is that it is a city of dreams. It is a place where if you can make it here, again, you can make it anywhere. People come here from all over the world to have the opportunity to be able to grow a business, to provide for their families, to be able to make their children's lives better than their lives. And right now, New York City really isn't keeping that promise when it comes to MWBE firms. We say, come here, we want to do business with you, and it doesn't happen. And as I said, I've seen too many people over the years, worked with too many, been too disappointed myself in that quality and firm that should have the business, but doesn't get it. It is about who sits at the top. It is about who the next mayor of the city of New York is. That's what will determine the direction that New York City goes in, is that passion and commitment and belief and principle there. And that's the one thing that you, at forums over the next year and a half, that you should demand, that you should ask us time and time and time again, what do you believe in, and do you believe in a fair and equitable city? That's what it's about. So let me end there. This has been, as I said, for those who have been
Well, it's
fighting.
not quite
for
over yet, by the way, but.
For those who've been fighting for MWBE over the years, this is a great moment. Because this issue now is front and center in a full room of people who are concerned and want to see better. But we still have a long, long way to go. And yes, David, on to you now.
Thank you. Since there's sort of an unofficial term limits for moderators, I'm going to introduce three advocates from the MWBE community who have some questions to pose to the undeclared and declared candidates here. This is going to be a much looser format, so feel free to chime in, but please limit your answers. And you know, not everybody has to speak and all that. So the first person who's going to pose a question is Kenya Abreu, who's the president and CEO of the New York Women's Chamber of Commerce. So, Ms. Abreu, I will.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. The original question that I had was to ask the candidate's position on the affidavit that was being asked by the city of New York to Latino business owners to prove their ethnicity when that's not being asked not being asked by the African American and Asian Americans to provide an affidavit also to prove their ethnicity. But I'm happy to report that I met with the city, with SBS, and the mayor's office of contract, and my colleague Frank Garcia, who's here from the Hispanic. The Coalition of Hispanic Chambers, and they have agreed this morning to do away with the affidavit, so that's a great thing. But so it does show that we can work with the city of New York. And my question is, the controller, Lou, you mentioned several times the report card, which it's a great thing. However, we have not heard about any disciplinary actions being taken against those agencies that have not met their MWB goals. And moving forward, if the candidates here, if you get elected, what specific disciplinary actions are you planning to take against those agencies that don't meet their MWB goals? Are you planning to make that part of Local Law 129? And also, what disciplinary actions are you planning to take against those companies, those prime contractors that don't meet their MWB goals and that lie to the city about meeting their MWB goals?
Kenya, I just want to say congratulations on your achievement today, which is a big deal. And thank you. I've seen the work you do in the community, and thank you for it. Just a simple point. Remember, we have to undo 20 years of neglect here. I want to be very clear. To fix this agency by agency in the city government, you're talking about 2 administrations, a grand total of 20 years where there were not consequences if an agency head didn't make progress with MWBEs. So to Kenya's question, I think, again, the central way to change this is appointing the right people and letting them know that this is one of the ways they will be graded on whether they get to keep doing their job or not. I think the question of consequences for firms is very important. I don't know, I don't have the exact answer, but I think that's something that we all need to formulate. But I think the real action happens at the agency level, and if 20 years of history continues in the future, we'll all be back here wondering what happened. But I think we have to say in the next administration, each agency head is held responsible on a professional level. They have to prove that they're making progress if they want to keep running an agency representing the people, all of the people of New York City. And I want to say this kind of forum is what will fuel that accountability.
You know, I think, I'm sorry, just quickly, I think it's, if the commissioners aren't meeting the goals that the mayor has established, then you're not a commissioner who works for the mayor of the city of New York. It is as simple as that. You know, so it's not a question of what happens, what are the consequences. If the mayor's committed and his commissioners aren't meeting the goals, then you get commissioners who will meet those goals and meet the commitment of the mayor.
And the goal should be in, for example,
Well,
the
I'm
mayor's
sorry, John, I have to
management.
cut you off because we're going to introduce Mr., just because of the limited time here, I'm going to introduce Mr. Nayan Parikh, and then you can go and answer his question, so everybody has a chance. He's the president of the Society of Indo-American Engineers and Architects, and Vice President of Ashnu International. So he has a question. So, and then John, you can go, and then whoever wants to jump in next, and then we have one more.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Sandra, and thank you, Greg, for putting this great program. My quick question is, since 2005, Local Law 129 has eliminated Asian engineers, architects, and all professional contractors. How fast we can modify this Local Law 129?
As soon as the baseline study is done, which we need to hold everyone accountable to make sure that's done as quickly as possible, then we can move very quickly to move forward. I think as we've heard today, there's a lot of agreement on what the changes need to be in local law 129, so I don't anticipate it taking very long at all.
I think it's shorter than that.
Sorry.
I think it's shorter than that because, you know, the baseline study, as by many accounts, has been completed. It just hasn't been revealed or published or disclosed to the public. So what we need to do, and this was an issue where some categories were eliminated from Local Law 129, it was always as part of the discussions leading to the passage of Local Law 129, that within 1 year, or perhaps at most within 2 years of the passage of Local Law 129, that there would be a review of the disparities and therefore the goals set under the law. So that should have happened a long time ago, and I agree with Chris, because I think it's already out there. It shouldn't take very long to update the goals as envisioned under Local Law 129, which, by the way, are not arbitrary goals. There are goals based on historic disparities that continue to exist in the city of New York.
So we're going to get to Scott and to Tom with Mr. Jim Heiliger, who's the president and CEO of the Association of Minority Enterprises of New York. Mr. Heiliger?
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Because I'm short, don't mean you can't give me no respect. I've been very tame today, unknowingly, because this is the new agenda, and I'm not going to talk about the Supreme Court selling the country. I'm just going to raise one issue that's been missing today that's very important, and I think would solve all of these issues. I think the next mayor needs to be committed to setting up development opportunities for minority and women-owned businesses. Because if we are a developer of a program, of a site, of a project, we use professional staff all the way down the line. We hire our own CM, our own architect, our own engineers, our own suppliers, our own contractors. HPD, EDC, and all of the city agencies have failed to set aside land use opportunities for us to become developers. I would like to see I would like to know which one of you would make a priority to provide inclusion and a list for developers, for minority and women to be developers of the city.
So, to be fair, this is Scott and Tom
Scott, you want to jump in?
have the floor.
Okay, you go first.
Obviously, you know, we need to do that. This is going to be a broad-based sort of inclusionary thing. So clearly, if the city has projects, you know, one of the ideas that I have is we should be selling air rights above schools in the city so that we can then rebuild our schools. I don't know if Lorraine Grillo agrees with me, but it's worked in a couple of places around the city, including Spruce Street. I would embark on a 20-year plan to rebuild all the schools in the city. We should seek out women and minority developers and women and minority construction workers to make that happen, and that will create a lot of jobs and a lot of taxes for the city.
So, sir, you are absolutely right. It is a worthy and necessary goal for everybody to have the ability to participate in the great land use and zoning developments in this city. And we have negotiated, and I mentioned Chris and other members of the council, we have negotiated to make sure that there is WBE components to that during our land use discussions. But the bottom line here is people get into the land use and zoning discussion when they have access to capital, when they have a real ability to get a seat at the table with funding and bonding and all the resources to compete in a very robust real estate market. And that is where we have to bring the agencies together, HPD, the mayor's office, and others, to look at ways to give opportunities to those who are raising capital, those who are getting access to capital. And when you look at other cities like Philadelphia, they understand it. They've created a fund, a business retention and development fund, so that you can access it. Again, not to give anything away. This is not a giveaway program, but to help people through access to capital, then hopefully control a site and build it out. When we have partnered in this way in the city, the results have been magnificent, and we do have to do a better job doing that.
And I think that it's not just the announcement or the deal for land use development, but it's also, because as Scott mentioned, it's been included in the Columbia University development. It's been included in, for example, the plan to redevelop Willets Point in Queens. The goals are there. The problem is that there's no mechanism to see if in fact the goals are met. So it's not only imperative that it gets included in, that these goals get included in the development contracts and projects, but that there needs to be a mechanism by which to monitor the actual flow of dollars to minority contractors.
You know, which just brings us to, there needs to be opportunity and diversity from top to bottom. You know, from top to bottom, from legal to, you know, to architectural, to engineering, to developers, to, and up and down the line. That's what we need. We need real opportunity.
Thank you very much. What's that? Go ahead. All right. I think, thank you very much for, we could go on, but we will have many opportunities to do so. So I wanted to thank the candidates for being here. Obviously, you know, we can certainly talk afterwards, and I'm going to now yield the floor to the sponsors of this terrific event again. So, thank you.
We want to thank David Chen from the New York Times for his professional expertise. And we ask your indulgence for just a moment. First, we want to thank you candidates. And when they said this is the first forum, that history has smiled upon us, and you have helped us make a significant day, a breakthrough day in New York City, and we want to thank you. On behalf of my co-chair, our co-chairs, Sandra Wilkins, we want to salute her for all of her efforts and contributions. We want to thank Andrew and Walter, Andrew and Morgan, and all of the people at Jasmine, and all the people at City and State. And I want to set the record straight, because things happen, people rewrite history. We came to City and State with the agenda and the idea. We came to City and State with the agenda and idea. They received it, we formed the partnership. That's what created today. We've been knocking on doors and marching a mighty long time. And so we want to get the record straight. And so we also want to say that on January 1st, 2014, one of these people will put their hand on a Bible at City Hall and take the oath of office. We are delighted that you chose to recognize the importance of this problem, this issue today, because this issue is connected to the issues that we didn't speak about today. If you get this issue right, then we don't have to worry about welfare. If you get this issue right, then jobs in our communities begin to appear. If you get this issue right, domestic violence begins to change. And so we wanted to make sure that this issue was the first time that they came together. And so we want to state at least 3 of the highlights from what we believe the new agenda to be. We believe that someone at City Hall has to get up every day worrying about diversity in New York City, but have the authority of the mayor. And so we had, earlier today, we had experts. We had the chief diversity officer from the New York Federal Reserve Bank come and tell us how it's done. We went to the private sector and got one of the most successful diversity programs in America, the chief diversity officer of the Nielsen Company, come and give us examples. We got up early in the morning and then networked with one another, because it's not about government doing everything for us. If we're going to take care of business, we have to be about business, so we have to do something for ourselves. And so we began to network with one another to create opportunities for ourselves working together. And then we also decided that we were going to listen very closely to the experts that spoke before you. We had a panel on pensions and reforms. Why is that important? Because one of the principles of the new agenda is thinking outside the box. There are things that are not in the city charter that you can do. You can go to a bank and say, we put our money here in this bank and we want you to change your lending practices. There are other things that can be done, and we want you to unleash the power of your imagination and your diverse staff to achieve these goals, which are unimaginable. We're not going to reduce them to a number. They are greater than a number. They are the combination of all of the energies and aspirations of the people of the city of New York. And so we ask that you go forth and do well, continue on this path. 5 of you will not make it. 5 of you will not make it, but 5 of you will, we hope, remain in public life and continue to make contributions. And for the one that does make it, we stand as your partner from day one and from this day forth to contribute ideas, to identify individuals, firms, and opportunities, and to work with you as the next mayor of the city of New York. Now we ask now that you go forth and tell somebody where you were today. Tell them that history knocked on my door and I answered. That I responded to City and State and Sandra Wilkins and all of the people who came together today and set aside their entire agenda to make history in the city of New York. And when this happens, we are convinced, yea, we are convicted, that the best is yet to come. God bless you, and thank you for being here. If we could just have a joint picture. If we all stand together, it'll make it easier for the photographer.
So I'll send you some dates, and I'm going to have Brian post it. But anyway, you were missed.
I don't know what they wanted it for, but I received that email, but I